Welcome to Find Myself Free, the podcast. I'm Ellie Young, alcohol-free life coach, mom, and athlete. I'm dedicated to helping others change their relationship to alcohol by sharing my journey of transformation. Fascinated by my own capacity for change after decades of gray area drinking, I'm passionate about sharing what I've learned from neuroscience and positive psychology to help you break free from the drinking cycle and unlock your true potential. Hear my personal stories of triumph and struggle as I navigate raising two boys, finding myself after 40, building a business, and doing it all alcohol free. From women's health and cycle syncing to fasting and biohacking, this podcast is your roadmap to a healthier, purpose filled life that starts with changing your relationship to alcohol. It's time to embrace change, find balance, and create the life you were meant for. Welcome to Find Myself Free. Hey, everybody. Before we get to the show, I wanted to invite you to check out my new free resource. It's called Breaking Up with Booze. Check out the link in my show notes. But essentially, this is just a free guide where I break down the two most common beliefs that are keeping women stuck in the drinking cycle. Now, I know what you need. You want to feel confident socializing alcohol-free. You want to be able to manage your stress, but without the crutch of alcohol. And ultimately, we all want to experience joy and connection without the hangover. So this is a completely free resource that you should check out, Breaking Up with Booze, because I know you are finally ready to level up your health. So check it out today. Head on over to my show notes and get the link. I hope to see you there. Hey, everybody. I have a very cool guest for you today. I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Jenn Chrisman. She is a functional nutritionist and integrative health practitioner with a doctorate in clinical psychology and certifications in holistic health and functional medicine. After transitioning from a decade-long career as a clinical psychologist, she shifted her focus from the diagnose and treat model to a more integrative, holistic approach to health. Her passion for wellness was ignited in 2017 when her mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, an experience that laid bare the limitations of the conventional healthcare system. This journey, combined with a personal health crisis in 2022, led her to pursue a Master's of Science in Nutrition and Integrative Health. With the focus on empowering women to reclaim their self, she blends evidence-based science with ancestral wisdom, specializing in metabolic health, hormone balancing, and chronic symptom management. She believes food is medicine and develops individualized protocols that honor each person's bio-individuality. As a functional practitioner, she uses comprehensive wellness plans that include functional lab testing, nutrition education, and support for nervous system regulation to address root causes rather than merely suppress symptoms. Living in an urban SoCal beach town, but with her heart in a tropical destination like Costa Rica, she is a mother to two middle schoolers and an advocate for self-authority and health. She rejects a one-size-fits-all approach, emphasizing that every woman's journey is unique and that the medical system often invalidates women's experiences. Through her practice, she seeks to revolutionize the way women approach their bodies, food, and health. You are going to love today's episode. And without further ado, on to the show. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Find Myself Free. I have an amazing guest today. She is an old friend of mine, and we have a bit lost touch, but I have been following her journey on Instagram, and I'm so excited she's here with us today. Hello, Jenn. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am I'm great. I'm in a good mood. I'm so happy that you agreed to be on this podcast because we have so much in common. And the journey you have been on has been so inspiring and so cool to watch. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and kind of where you're headed with everything?
Yeah, so I am a functional nutritionist and an integrative health practitioner. I, in a former life, was a licensed clinical psychologist, and I spent more than a decade practicing as a psychologist. Before there was, I mean, how deep into the story do we want to go? But recognizing that there were a lot of limitations within myself and the paradigm of psychotherapy as a whole that just was not a good fit for me. And I tried really hard for many years to fit into the paradigm and to be who I was told I was supposed to be as a psychologist. And a lot of it was around the diagnose, treat, model that I just couldn't find myself agreeing with. Like deep in my heart, I was like, I can't diagnose the human condition. And so much of what we're placing labels on, so much of what we are prescribing medications for, are really deeper issues around lack of resiliency, lack of self acceptance, not being in alignment with ourselves, operating in a world that is not meant for human nature.
Mhm.
And so after 10 years of practicing in that space, I shifted my practice a little bit. I started doing more business coaching for therapists and teaching them how to build a successful private practice. And I really enjoyed that aspect of coaching. And I walked into a world where I was like, wow, there are so many more opportunities and so much more available to me in coaching than some of the limitations of traditional therapy. And so I chose to walk away from my practice and I went just under the umbrella of coaching. And then about 3 years ago, I went through a really significant health crisis. That's like a life threatening health crisis that forced me into yet another layer of learning and understanding and healing within myself. And this ignited a passion for me that had always been present. I've always been into health and wellness and following the latest like trends and keeping up with, just taking care of my body, biohacking, all of those things have always fascinated me, which is why when I went through a health crisis, it was such a deep blow to my system on so many levels. And healing that what was happening in my body opened up a whole new world for me that inspired me to go back to school to get a master's in nutrition and integrative health and step into a more holistic and integrative approach to the work that I was already doing.
Wow, that is so amazing. I love that your passion for this stuff is combined with so much drive and this like passion to share it with others, that there's just this innate coach inside of you. I feel the same way with my sobriety stuff, that like I felt like it was too good to keep to myself. Like I want to keep passing these messages on to other women, because the culture is shifting significantly from the traditional kind of doctor model. There's so much more information out there for people. There is so much more. The message to women is often now that you can kind of take control of your own health. What are some of the biggest shifts that you've seen kind of in the diet culture, in the nutrition culture, that we are now all kind of shifting towards?
Yeah, I think that I mean, one thing that I have to say is I think that women coming of age nowadays are so lucky to have access to information that we just did not have when I was in my 20s and even in my 30s. And one of the things that comes up so significantly for me right now is the idea of even just understanding as women how our bodies work and working hormonally and cyclically rather than this 24-hour cycle that we have all been conditioned to fit into. And women are really at a place where they are understanding,
Mhm.
oh, we change
Yeah.
week to week. Every single month, we are going through this huge process and learning how to recognize, learning how to honor, how to move with that, I think is one way that we are seeing massive shifts and agency coming back into our own health. I think another thing that people are recognizing, and this is something that I'm really, really, really passionate about, is understanding that nutrition is so much more than just calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
That for generations, I mean, I know I was raised in what we know as diet culture,
Mhm.
where it was, eating as few calories as you possibly could. And everything was low fat and low this and free that. But what we're really understanding, and you're seeing women and young girls really starting to recognize and appreciate the importance of not just calories, but nutrients.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I focus on as a functional nutritionist is how does the food actually function inside of our bodies? What happens when I eat 100 calories worth of steak versus 100 calories of processed, chemical shitstorm of a protein powder, even.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so people are recognizing and taking deeper care for the quality,
Yeah.
not just the quantity.
Yeah.
I also think that things are changing where we are recognizing, and this might be something that because of our age, I know you and I are in the same season of
Yeah.
life, and we both have middle schoolers, and we're both navigating the changes of being in our 40s and tapping on the door of perimenopause. And so I think women are starting to recognize too the importance of moving with our lifestyle, our life cycle, I should say, right? That what worked for us when we were in our 20s may or may not work in the same way. And we have to learn how to adjust and adapt the same way we have to learn to adjust and adapt on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
We need to do this generational, like each decade that we're moving through.
Yeah. I know. And a big layer too that I see in myself and a lot of my clients as well is this level of lack of compassion for ourselves and shame around the nutrition piece that because we were all raised in this diet culture that if we weren't getting it right, we beat ourselves up. And of course, there's this whole avenue of like eating disorders and the gray areas there. In fact, I think most women have some variety of an eating disorder, whether that's just like obsessive calorie counting, whether if
Yeah.
it's like obsessive working out, two of which I definitely participated in. But now it's almost like you said, you followed this health passion your whole life. So have I, but I was still getting it wrong. And I was still like, despite me thinking I was really educated and like doing all the right things, I was doing so many things wrong. And to have to like backpedal some of that stuff now and be like, okay, getting back to the basics and treating myself with compassion, like you said, paying attention to the cycle and seeing myself through the lens of supporting my hormones instead of just like as little as possible, working out as much as possible. If you need rest, something must be wrong with you. You need to push through it. The hustle culture.
Yeah.
Um, it's it really is a conversation of like compassion, getting back to this like, whoa, take the foot off the gas a bit, you know?
100%. And, the shame is woven into diet culture in so many different ways. Even the saying of eat less, move more. There's an insinuation there that if your body's not operating, if you're gaining weight, if you're struggling with something, you're doing something wrong, right? Oh, you're just eating too much or you're not moving enough.
Mhm.
And so woven into the fabric of this is the setup that first of all, there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And if something's not working, that means you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And therefore, because of so many of our conditioning as women, we will take that on as a reflection of worth,
Mhm.
of value, of goodness.
Mhm.
And so much. And this is why, stepping into the field of nutrition with a background in clinical psychology was a perfect fit for me because so much of this work is happening on the emotional and the spiritual level, and really doing the inner work to cultivate a relationship with ourselves, like you said, that is rooted in compassion
Mhm.
and that's also rooted in curiosity.
Mhm.
That is, with curiosity comes space for it not needing to be right and wrong. There comes space of like, oh, isn't this interesting?
Mhm.
Rather than, oh my God, I can't believe it didn't work.
Yep.
But that relationship is a practice and it requires a tremendous amount of courage and willingness to go inside and look honestly at
Yeah.
ourselves and meet ourselves in a new way, which for a lot of people and historically, we just want the answers, right? Just tell me what to eat.
Yep.
And again, in that place, there's this inherent setup that there is a right way and there's a wrong way. And yes, there are fundamentals,
Yep.
right? There are really, really basic foundations that it's always surprising to me, actually, like how many people are not following the basic foundation
Right.
of eating whole food,
Right.
moving your body, being out in nature. Like that is one that we're missing seriously. Like just like taking time to have your face in the sun,
Yeah.
um, quality sleep,
Yeah.
right? Social connection, like these are foundations that are required. And from there, the nuance, will change from person to person, but we have to be willing
Yeah.
to meet ourselves in that place of like, what do I really need? What do I
Yeah.
really like? Who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it seems so simple, but it gets so there's just so much baggage now around. I mean, not now, there always has been. And I think, we, like you said, we're very lucky to be coming of this like dawning of age where a lot of that is shifting. Um, although I do think it's quite complicated now with the introduction of all the like Ozempic, Mounjaro type of drugs here. And I'm curious, as a practitioner who is looking to do things more holistically for people and to really like shift relationships and the narratives we have around food and wellness, it's so tempting. And I've had a lot of conversations with people about this, about like, well, why would I do all that work if I could just take this shot?
Right. Well, this is the like I mean, this is the crux of the human struggle in
Yeah.
every area is that we all want a quick fix.
Yeah.
We all want just give me the pill. Nobody wants to have to put in the work. Like that is the truth. And there's no shame, there's no judgment. I will be the first person to raise my hand and say how many times in my life have I want to take the easier, softer way. I really do.
Yeah.
Um, and in so many ways, like I have very mixed, very complicated feelings about
Mm.
Ozempic and, not necessarily like the brand name Ozempic, but what actually is behind Ozempic, which are the
Yeah.
peptides. It's a
Right.
peptide therapy. And some of the research that we are seeing about what is possible with peptide therapy is amazing. Like you
Yeah.
can't deny what is happening. And even aside from weight loss, there's a lot of, we're seeing people actually like who have been struggling with fertility or getting pregnant all of a sudden.
Right.
And it's not because of the weight loss necessarily, but because of the actions of the peptides.
Right.
And so there's that on one hand. And then there's also the other side of it for me, which
Right.
is when you sign up to take something like
Yeah.
Ozempic, you're signing up for a lifelong prescription
Yeah.
and you are creating a dependency on something outside of yourself.
Yeah.
And you are creating a dependency not only on something outside of yourself, but something outside of yourself that is going to make someone else a lot of money.
Yeah.
There is so much value for the manufacturers of Ozempic in getting you on it because they just got a lifelong customer that is going
Yeah.
to, there's billions of dollars
Yeah.
behind these medications. And even when I'm working with clients and we're doing a pretty extensive protocol that involves supplements and all sorts of things, I'm always educating that the goal with supplements is not to create dependency for the rest of
Right.
your life. Like we add them in for short periods of time until we get our body to a
Yeah.
place where it is healed and operating the way that it is meant to, right?
Yeah.
We shouldn't. I'm like catching myself as I'm saying that because there are other conversations around like the depletion of our soil that
Yeah.
all of the nutrients are not available that there once were. And so some supplementation, like things like magnesium,
Mm.
we can't get it anymore from nature the
Yeah.
way that we used to. But in general, my go-to position, as often as we can, I am going to say, how can we return to nature? Because our bodies are absolute geniuses. Like
Yeah.
absolute genius. It has everything it needs. And if something is not working, the question that we're being taught to ask is how do I fix this? What can I take? What can I add in
Mm.
to make this work differently, right? Let me take the Ozempic if I have too much weight or whatever it is. But really the question that we need to be asking is what do I need to get back to? What do I need to remove? What is blocking my body
Right.
from doing what it innately knows how to do, which is
Right.
heal and
Yeah.
thrive?
Yeah, I love that. With regards to healing, one of the best methods that I've used as far as to kind of strip down and get back to nature has been fasting. But as I've gotten older, between 40 and 43, it really worked really well for me. And again, I had to shift the conversation from the meaning because when I first started fasting, I was like, ooh, this feels really a lot like just starving myself. And like the things I watched a lot of my friends go through in college or high school friends who I was like, they're starving themselves, and but to change that conversation into like, whoa, this is actually me healing and regenerating. And I like had injuries that would improve. I had plantar fasciitis that all of a sudden would disappear when I did some like 36-hour fast. I followed Dr. Mindy Pell's Fast Like a Girl protocol. But then something shifted at 43. It stopped. I wouldn't say it stopped working. My tolerance for it went down. I didn't feel as fueled for my workouts, and I was putting on weight in different areas. And I was like, this isn't, my composition was changing. So I was like,
Mhm.
something shifted hormonally, even though I was doing everything as holistically clean as possible with cycle syncing and whatnot. And so now I'm kind of shifting my gears around fasting, and I'm doing it at a different type of window. So I'm fueled for my workouts, but I'm still fasting. I usually shut it down at like 4 p.m. and I fast. So I kind of follow more of like a circadian rhythm type of fast.
Mhm.
I'm curious what your experience is with that and where you kind of stand now with it.
Yeah, that would be the exact suggestion that I would give to any woman, actually, regardless of age. So first of all, again, we have to, as women, we are cyclical. And so um, we're actually not designed to fast every single day of the month in the same way that a man could. And to be clear, actually, when I'm talking about fasting, I'm talking about intermittent fasting,
Right.
which is simply where we just create specific feeding windows, and those can vary depending. So ideally, if you want to fast, I would plan to do your fasting between your follicular and your ovulation. But once you go into luteal, where you actually need more calories, your metabolism is amping up a little bit, you need more carbohydrates, it can be a lot more stressful on the body. And as we are aging, that phase in general can sometimes tend to be a little, we need to just be more sensitive and do a
Right.
little bit more tending to ourselves during that phase period. Um, and like you said, there are so many benefits to fasting. There's so many benefits. And fasting is not a new trend. It is not something that just came on. It has been around for thousands of years. And you can look to cultures from around the world who utilize fasting for many different reasons, including spiritual
Hmm.
reasons. It's woven into the fabric of almost every religion.
Right.
Um, so there's a lot of history behind fasting. But again, as women, we just need to be very mindful. And the biggest thing is recognizing the role of
Yeah.
cortisol and blood sugar and how that plays a part and how we can support our bodies in optimizing cortisol regulation and blood sugar regulation. And the way to do that is really simply, like you said, shifting your fasting window to what is actually a more natural state of fast, which is the afternoon and evening.
Right.
Historically, as you know, again, here we let's look to nature. We are meant to wake up with the sun. We get up, we go do our work for the day. We're outside, we're moving, we're eating, we're doing what needs to get done. And then the sun starts going down and we retreat. And then typically we would go to bed when the sun went down.
Right.
And we're heading into a time of year where it's going to be dark at 5:30 pretty soon. And
Yeah.
so choosing if you're going to fast to just shift your window to a time period where you're already naturally fasting. Most of us,
Yeah.
minimum, should be fasting 8 hours a day, just based on I'm asleep for 8 hours.
Right.
So if you want to extend that, maybe push it, 4 hours earlier. So if you're going to bed at 10, you cut off your feeding window at 6 o'clock, or you want to push it to 4 o'clock. That's a great way to play around with it and get the benefit
Hmm.
of fasting, but also do it in a way where you're not going to spike your cortisol first thing in the morning when it's already naturally spiking.
Right. Right. Oh, interesting. Okay. So yeah, cortisol does naturally spike in the morning to help get you going. So you would think if you are additionally going to fast at that time, it further raises the cortisol.
Exactly.
And then if you work out,
And
back.
then you right. And then also we have to take into consideration what's happening with our blood sugar this whole time too, because what the body does is when your blood sugar decreases, your cortisol increases. And so so naturally, if you're fasting, you're going to be raising your cortisol. It's your body's way of compensating for that lack of glucose. And the rise in cortisol will actually help stimulate glucose production within the
Right.
body. So if you have any sort of blood sugar dysregulation, which I would say is actually one of the biggest
Hmm.
um, issues that I see in people. Most people are coming and they're like, oh, I've got issues. I have hormonal imbalances. And we back it up a step further. And it's like, actually, you have dysregulated blood sugar.
Right.
And like that is a first line of defense is how do I regulate my blood sugar? And so when you throw fasting into the mix here,
Yeah.
right, you can really step into some questionable territory.
Yeah, no, I have a big background in diabetes. I worked for Bayer Diabetes Care for about a decade, and I sold the meters that check blood sugar, and
Mm,
I worked with patients on pumps and helping them adjust their insulin dose. So I feel so grateful for that background and that education because I think I've always lived as if I had diabetes because I was like, I know how to count carbs and I know what it does, how much it raises your blood sugar. I've worn a continuous glucose monitor a handful of times just to get that feedback loop of like what certain foods are doing to my body. And I love the conversation now that is everything is shifting away from like calorie counting to like managing your blood sugar. And
mhm.
I think it's a big information gap for people though still. I don't quite think they understand. They kind of just think it's sugar. They don't maybe understand the impact of carbohydrates, glycemic index, how
Mhm.
much fiber can actually offset. Why don't you speak to some
Yeah.
of that for some of my
Uh,
audience who may not know?
Well, even recognizing food timing and the
Mm.
order in which we eat the food on our plate. And so it's exactly what you're saying is that again, like we're looking at this through a functional lens. And when I highly recommend a glucose monitor, and in fact, I'm partnered with Nutrisense, and I will give you guys my code for I think you it's like $75 off,
Oh, cool.
which I love, and I recommend this to everybody because it gives you qualitative data that you can actually real time look at and understand. And the way that it works, for those who don't know, is it's this tiny little sensor, a continuous glucose monitor. It's so small, it feels it's like a sticker that goes on the back of your arm. There is like a little tiny, it's not even a needle. I tell people
Mhm.
it's like softer than a needle, but it does. It kind of goes right under the very first layer of your skin. And it is monitoring and measuring the glucose in your body 24 hours a day. And you just take your phone and you scan the little sensor and you get a reading. And so you can see exactly how your body is responding to the foods that you are eating. And what we are looking for is we want to have, there should be some fluctuation. A flat line is not necessarily ideal.
Yeah.
We should have a little bit of an ebb and a flow throughout the day, but also these like massive peaks and massive valleys are where people get into a lot of trouble.
Mhm.
And so, learning how to eat, recognizing that we really should not be eating carbohydrates on their own. We should always be pairing carbohydrates with ideally a protein and a fat, or at least one or the other, to help offset and balance the impact to our blood sugar that carbohydrates have. And so, carbohydrates, whether it is a sweet potato that you're eating or a gummy bear, right?
Yeah.
It's all converted into sugar in the body, and which is fine. There's nothing actually wrong with like carbohydrates are not bad. Carbohydrates are how we get fuel. It's a really easy access point for us to get fuel. The body uses it very extremely well. we can make fuel without consuming carbohydrates, but it just requires a lot more from the body to do it. So eating sugar, easy way to just like boop, get the energy up. Um, but recognizing that every time I eat carbohydrates, I am actually, my body is converting that into sugar.
Yeah. Give us an example of like order of food and pairing of a fat and a protein and what that mechanism is for offsetting a big blood sugar spike.
Yeah. So ideally, an ideal plate of food will, even if it's just a snack, you're always going to have a protein as the primary foundation of the meal. And I personally, sorry for any vegetarians or vegans out there, but I am biased towards animal protein
Mm.
because animal protein has all of the vitamins, minerals, and amino acids that our bodies need to build. So, protein is the primary building block of
Mhm.
our bodies. When we consume protein, the body will take that and use that material for the building material of who you are. Your tissues, your organs, your muscles, everything is built from the protein that you're eating, which is why it's so important, first
Right.
and foremost. From there, you have fats and you have carbohydrates. And both of these are used by the body as fuel. So you have the building block and then you have the energy. So when you are constructing a plate, you want to give yourself all of it.
Hmm.
And depending on how your body thrives and how your body works best, you can vary and change the quantity, the amount of fat and carbs that you're eating. I personally tend to prefer fats over carbs. And so my meals are, I'll eat a steak and then I'll have, some butter, some cheese, an avocado, something for fat. And then I'll add in a piece of fruit or some zucchini, butternut squash, something for my carb. But regardless of how you're choosing to, like, what exactly you're choosing to eat, you want to start with your protein and your fat and then add the carb in at the end. And it's so fun actually to play around with this when you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor because you can actually test it and you can see it in real time. What happens if I eat the fruit first? My husband and I, we literally eat ribeye almost every night for dinner. And I'm not, it's not, we put it on a plate. We're not eating it on a cutting board. It's not
Yeah.
carnivore or anything like that, but it's
Yeah.
just, we eat it. We love it.
Yeah.
And watermelon. And if I chop up the watermelon and I'm noshing on that watermelon before eating the steak, you'll see the
Right.
blood sugar rise versus
Right.
if I eat my steak first and then I save the watermelon for afterwards, there's a little bit less of a spike, a little bit less of a peak that happens.
Yeah, and to just to take this even another step further, so two things I want to touch on here is we didn't talk about fiber, and I know that's another thing that can really offset the blood sugar spike. And two, what people may not understand is why is it bad to actually have that spike? Because calorically, you're eating the exact same thing, but if you eat it in the order with the fat and the protein first or the fiber first, it doesn't spike your blood sugar. And what does that lead to for people who may not be aware?
Yeah. So what's happening when our blood sugar spikes is now we're introducing the, hot topic, which is insulin.
Yeah.
And insulin is actually where the real issue comes in.
Mhm.
And when you have these chronically high, elevated glucose levels, what happens is your body starts not being able to naturally respond to insulin, and we're becoming insulin resistant. So, insulin is what comes in to regulate the blood sugar. It is what comes in, it creates channels, it opens up the cells to be able to then move the glucose from the bloodstream into your cell to get something so we can start to work with
Mhm.
it and actually utilize it. If you're in a chronic state of high glucose and your body is requiring dumping insulin to try and support the regulation of the blood glucose, we start to develop insulin resistance. And the resistance now is where insulin is just, it's floating around and we're not able to actually capture it. Our body can't utilize it. And insulin resistance becomes, highly correlated with increase in weight,
Right.
right? Um, Estrogen dominance.
Right.
Um, so many of these, obviously type 2 diabetes,
Yeah. All of the
um,
metabolic disorders, essentially. Yeah. High
everything.
triglycerides. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love this description. This is what we would talk about to our patients in diabetes was that like insulin was trying to helps like knock on the door of the cell and like bring the insulin in. And when you develop insulin resistance from chronic high blood sugar and chronic high insulin, is that the cells become like deaf to the insulin.
Uh-huh.
They're like, Go away, we have too much." And so, what happens then? Insulin then stores that excess sugar as fat, right?
That's exactly what happens. So we have all of this insulin that's floating that our body is like, I don't know what to do with this. And so it's holds on to it as fat storage.
Yeah,
And this is also, again, I'm going to bring it back. It's very closely tied to estrogen dominance
yeah,
as well, because this is where estrogen gets stored in the fat cells as
yeah.
well. And so there, again, when people are coming to me, women are coming with this hormonal imbalance, the first thing I'm going to say is, let's look at your blood sugar.
Mhm.
Let's look at, and again, I'm looking at it through a lens that's a little bit different than what traditional Western medicine is looking at it through, because I'm looking through functional levels rather than what's considered normal. And, for most people, we're looking at, in terms of diagnosing a disease,
Right.
your doctor's gonna be like, oh, fasting glucose level 95 and above is typically when they even start like questioning that something might be going on. When I'm looking at it, I'm like, if it's above 90, even if it's above like 89, 87, 88, we're gonna start saying, oh, we need to start doing some work here because this is putting too much stress on the body. And if we want to regulate our hormones, we have to regulate
Yeah.
our glucose. We have to. Like, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah. I think this is so interesting that the spike is really the problem here. And that's
Well, it's the spike and it's the recovery too.
right.
Because it's also sometimes, and this is the same thing with like jumping into a cold plunge or fasting, right? Like sometimes that burst of stress on the body is a great way for your body to be like, oh, we got to adapt and we got to do something here. And it can like actually trigger. And what we want to look at is how quickly does your body recover
Okay.
from it?
Yeah.
Um, Spikes that are happening all day, every day, right? That's a level of stress on the body
Yeah.
that is, going to take a toll long term. But I want to just like highlight that because again, this is where we get into fear. And someone is like, "Oh my God, I have a spike." Well, okay, we don't have to freak out yet. Like, sometimes a spike is okay. It's not the end of the world. What did your body do when you had the spike?
Mhm.
Spikes can be a great way to see, oh, look, my body's doing exactly what it's designed to do.
Right. Yeah. I often talk about like some of these cool strategies that have been like all over the internet is like just walking for 10 minutes post meal
Hmm.
can offset your spike. But I heard this, I think it was on the Glucose Goddess talking about that it's really like if you're eating the exact same thing, but yet the order of the foods reduces that spike to a manageable level. So it's really like the pace at which
Yeah.
this sugar is coming in
Yep.
that your body can handle it. But if
Yeah.
it comes in too aggressively, too steep,
Yep.
then it's like, oh shit, we can't. It's like drinking out of a fire hose, right? And it just starts shoving it into fat cells
Yep.
instead of being like, oh, okay, if it comes in at a gradual pace, we know what to do with it, and your body can like utilize it to fuel
Hmm.
to fuel itself. And that's fascinating to me that it's
Yeah.
truly just like a pace,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's where some of these fundamentals, right? Like these foundations can be so helpful of even just recognizing it doesn't matter like what I'm eating. If I eat a carbohydrate, if I eat a sugar source on its own, I'm going to see a massive spike. And there might be a difference, right, between if I drink a cup of apple juice versus if I eat the whole apple.
Yeah.
But that spike is still not going to be the same as if I were to eat that apple with a piece of cheese and some almond butter or Paleo Valley or Chomps meat stick, something like that to like really balance the protein, fat, and carbohydrate.
Yeah, it's fascinating and it might sound complex to some people, but when you really get the foundations, it does become quite simple.
Yeah.
Um, I want to know, so you mentioned estrogen dominance quite a bit, and that's definitely an area my listeners are like very interested in. So you talk about getting to the root cause. And so how do women really start to kind of identify one, that they are estrogen dominant, and two, like where the root cause is for
Yeah.
them?
Yeah. So this is something that's very interesting because a lot of women chase the hormonal imbalance. And one thing I'm always saying and reminding people is that actually hormonal imbalance is not a root cause.
Right.
Hormonal imbalance is a symptom. And I do like doing functional lab work with my clients. I think it can be very helpful. When I was first diagnosed with estrogen dominance back in 2021, um, I did not actually, aside from weight gain, I didn't have any of the symptoms that the medical doctors would typically look at. And why I was like dismissed. I still had a regular period, and that's usually like the biggest one that people are going to point to is if you're still regular, if you're not skipping periods or you don't have irregularity, I find that most medical doctors are going to just dismiss you and like, oh, there's nothing to do here. But that's not the only symptom. I never had an irregular period. My cycle has been like freaking clockwork, almost to like the minute. I could tell you when, like, okay, I'm gonna start bleeding at this hour.
Yeah.
Like a perfect 28-day cycle through all of my health crises.
Wow.
But for me, what I was experiencing and what I see so many women experience is first and foremost the weight gain. Like that is, and again, going back and recognizing that the body holds estrogen in fat cells.
Right.
And so, if there's nowhere for the estrogen to go, the body will actually create new fat cells to place it, to hold it. Like, okay, this is where we can store this.
Yeah.
Mood swings are a big one. Um, Fatigue is another one. The loss of libido is, I mean, there's so many. And the other thing too is recognizing that I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we see in this work with hormones and female hormones is that we want to isolate the singular hormone, right? Estrogen dominance, but recognizing that estrogen is working with progesterone, it's working with testosterone, it is working with cortisol, it's
Yeah.
working with cholesterol.
Mm.
Um, all of these, like there is a whole cascade
Yeah.
of hormones that are working together that we have to address. And so getting to the root cause oftentimes is going to be some combination of these foundations that we've always already talked about, right? The nutrition that we're putting in our body.
Yeah.
A lot of it when it comes to estrogen dominance is going to be detox pathways and making sure that there's somewhere for to express and to move the excess estrogen through. Um, but it's also going to be stress management,
Mhm.
and it's going to be shifting the movement styles, moving away from those high intensity hit workouts and moving into more of the low impact um, walking, muscle building,
Yeah.
these things. Um, and it's going to be the relationship that we have with ourselves too.
Yeah. I definitely see again some information gaps with a lot of women who are healthy, that are trying to eat right, that are trying to exercise and do all the things around estrogen and estrogen dominance, and also this depleting estrogen as we grow older. Like, wait a minute. So I'm worried about estrogen dominance, yet my estrogen is dipping. And they're like,
Yeah.
"So what do I want to do?" And so can you explain more about how like the good estrogen and the bad estrogen? I've done this on previous podcasts, but I think it would sound better coming from you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so again, and I think this is where like we want to be so careful that we don't pigeonhole ourselves into chasing after just one of the hormones, recognizing that your estrogen is working in a symbiotic relationship with the other hormones. And so we want to actually pull out and look at how is all of this working with each other. And this is so interesting because, and this was, I actually went through this myself at one point where I was considering HRT and I was looking at hormone replacement therapy and had spoken with my own functional naturopathic doctor.
Hmm.
And she was like, okay, so based on your lab results, we should do progesterone, but only progesterone during the second half of your cycle. So days 14 to 28. And then once you start your bleed, you stop taking the progesterone. And I was like, okay, great. This sounds lovely. I called my medical doctor just to get the prescription. Right. Because I was like, I have insurance. I may as well order um, the medication through my insurance and utilize that. And so I was on the phone with the gynecologist and I'm telling her this is what's happening. I'm estrogen dominant and I am wanting a prescription for progesterone. And she, 5-minute conversation, asked for some symptoms, dismissed most of it. Her first response to me was, well, rather than progesterone, why don't I just put you on hormonal birth control?
Yep.
Um, to which I said, no, thank you. But right, this is the first line of defense for most medical doctors.
Yeah.
And then after that, I was very adamant. I am not going on hormonal birth control pill. I haven't been on a hormonal birth control pill since before I had my son, who's about to turn 14. So 14 years of healing from that journey.
Yeah.
And so then she was like, okay, I'll write you the prescription for progesterone, but I'm also going to write you a prescription for the estrogen patch.
Yeah.
And and I said, why? I'm
Yeah.
estrogen dominant.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
And it was literally a blanket statement coming
Wow.
from the doctor of this is how we do it. And this is how we do it because, oh, well, if your progesterone's dipping, then your estrogen must be dipping as well, right? You've hit this certain age. But again, this goes back to some of this blanket
Right.
advice of right, same thing, like, oh, you're not missing a period yet, or you're not irregular with your period, so therefore everything's fine, we don't need to worry about it. And some of these messages that we get as women, yes, there will come a point where the estrogen is naturally going to change. That is exactly what menopause is. Like that is the definition of what's happening in menopause is we're losing our estrogen.
Mhm.
Um, but oftentimes, like, I think that as women, we have to be careful that we don't adopt a truth that is not a truth yet for
Right.
us, right? That my estrogen is declining or I need to supplement with estrogen.
Right.
Maybe, but this is where trial and error comes in. Like you
Yeah.
might need to. And it's the truth is sometimes we don't actually know until we do it and we're like, oh, I feel amazing.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing too with just, oh, weight gain is a natural part of aging and you're
Yeah.
aging it. So you just have to be okay with it. And
Yeah.
so many of these blanket truths, I say, well, is that actually true for me?
Yeah.
And in my experience, I actually ended up not even using the progesterone. I didn't do any of the HRT. I was able to manage and navigate and heal what was happening for me hormonally by increasing the amount of fat I was eating.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think this is a really important for everyone to hear because so many of my patients as well are like, they want to get the lab tests. They want to know where their hormones are at. And I'm like, this is just like one point in time. We understand that your hormones are fluctuating. We understand that most likely they're on the decline if you're in this kind of age range, but that estrogen dominance could mean you're actually low progesterone.
Yep.
And estrogen dominance could mean that you just have a high toxic load, that you're just have a lot of toxins in your thing. There's the estrogen dominance could be coming from all the bad stuff you're doing, but the good estrogen, the estrogen that we need to be making to perform all these functions in our body that keep us feminine, that keep us, good for brain health, heart health, bone health, all the things, that estrogen needs to be supported with nutrition, like the
Uh-huh.
good nutrition.
Yep.
It's always kind of going what I like to tell people is like, yes, you could go do these tests, but at the end of the day, the treatment's going to be the same. It's going to be like,
Yeah.
let's clean up the diet, let's remove as much toxins as possible, let's start moving our body, let's start eating in a way that really nourishes, and watching the blood sugar. And so it's funny because it's like whether you can test it or not, here's the thing, you can't test. I wish they had like a blood glucose monitor for our hormone levels. I think that's coming, right?
Yeah.
Like test your hormones like
Every day.
or weekly, and
Mm-hmm.
then you could really start to play with things and start to understand. And my journey, so I feel like whatever I did between 40 and 43, I was like kicking ass. Like I was cycle syncing. I've done so many things where I think I've maxed out all the holistic options to manage some of this stuff. And I get migraines. And speaking
That are connected to your cycle.
Yes. So
Yeah.
right before my period. So I was thinking it's progesterone related or the dip in the estrogen as well. And speaking of shame, like when I was hormone balancing and I thought I had nailed it, there were months that would go by where I didn't get the migraine. And then when I would get one, I would be like,
Yeah.
I do wrong? I must have
Yeah.
done something wrong. And I thought it was stress related. And I thought, but now they're coming consistently every month again. And so I've been to a naturopath, same thing. She's had me do a detox shake through Thorn.
Uh-huh.
I was like, I do a lot of this stuff already. Like, a lot of the supplements that are in the shake are just liver support type of things like glutathione, milk thistle. And I'm like, okay. Funny thing, I used to take a lot of those when I was drinking to help my liver. Um, and she wanted me to stop dairy and eggs,
Mm.
which I eat really high quality dairy, like I eat like raw cheese, and I eat cottage cheese and I eat a lot of plain Greek,
Yeah.
and then cutting the eggs, like it cut out big chunk of my protein sources for this.
Mm.
I've been doing it for this last month, and I still got a migraine. I don't
Yeah.
feel great. I don't
Yeah.
feel like myself. And again, I'm at this point now where like, is it my hormones? Do I need testosterone? Or is it because I cut out my protein sources and it was really hard to get adequate protein from just like I have to make meat all the time now. And that's hard for a lot of women to like either supplement with a shake or to like eat meat all day long. Um, and so that's just kind of where I'm at. I'm a little bit,
Yeah.
I thought I was confident I had it nailed. And then this last like 6 months, things have shifted again.
Yeah. And so where have you landed with it? What have you come to for yourself?
I'm awaiting my test results. So I got my hormones tested. I did a cortisol test, and then she had me in the interim trying this no eggs, no dairy, and doing this detox shake. So I can't wait to share my results with everybody. But again, I stress it like I am a study of one. I'm more active than most of the women I speak to. Like I'm a pretty like high intense athlete, and so a lot of what I do I have to fuel myself accordingly.
Yeah.
So again, it's really just sharing as much about what we're learning here,
Mm-hmm.
and and not giving up because there's so much.
Yeah.
I feel like
Well,
you
and
fail sometimes.
that's it. I think it's the permission for trial and error and the permission too that, oftentimes in life, and I've always said this, that things will work until they stop working.
Yeah.
And the reason why they stop working is actually, again, it's a beautiful adaptation of the human body, which is to adapt. And so when we start something new, and we see this all the time, especially with like elimination diets, and I will use elimination diets for very severe cases. But I always tell my clients that an elimination diet is never intended to be long term. It can't be. The goal is
Yeah.
always to develop flexibility and to be resilient. We want to develop resilient bodies. And when our bodies adapt and adjust, it's because of resilience. And so recognizing, oh, I'm doing something new and everything is amazing. There's a honeymoon period that
Mm.
comes. And oftentimes it's simply because we change, it's different. But then you're doing the same thing for a long period of time. And then it's like, oh, it's not actually having the same results that it once did. And part of this is like, and then this is where I love to dance and I love to play in the nuance, because on the one hand, we want consistency. We want to develop habits and lifestyles and ways of being that can carry us long term. We don't want to be bouncing around from like this thing to this thing to that thing, right? This is what keeps us trapped in a cycle
Right.
of like never ending chasing for the fix for whatever, right? We want to establish routine. And we also have to have enough variety in our everyday life that we don't become so habituated
Right.
to certain things. And so, but all of this, no matter what we're doing, it requires us to have a mentality of only feedback, never failure.
Right.
Right. And so if I'm doing something and it's working, this is amazing. This is incredibly great. Okay. I'm doing something and it's not working. And the perfectionist in me, right, the like wants to go into, oh, I'm failing, this isn't working, I did something wrong. No, actually, okay, isn't this amazing? That it's
Mhm.
not working. Great. This is contrast brings clarity. This
Right.
is showing parts where I get to. And again, this is just a bigger conversation too, which is around recognizing and challenging the pull and the seduction to fall into chasing the healing. And as someone who stands in the functional wellness community, I will say like it is not the panacea that everybody wants it to be. I think that because conventional medicine has gone so far off the rails in terms of losing people's trust, and people are really recognizing, wow, this system will never ever be designed for my wellness, right?
Right.
Everyone like shift into functional medicine.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden functional medicine became the golden child, right? And this is going to be the thing.
Mhm.
But in many ways, I think it can just perpetuate the same paradigm and the same story of conventional medicine, because it creates this dynamic where I'm looking for the thing that's wrong with me.
Right.
And so much of what we have to do is we have to allow ourselves to see ourselves as whole, to see ourselves as complete, be willing. And this is one that I can't tell you how many people I see who I work with who are so attached to their identity
Mhm.
of something being wrong with them. And
Right.
it's the work is really like, are you willing to see yourself as healthy and vibrant and thriving, even if there's a migraine, even
Yes.
if you put on 5 pounds, even if your blood sugar spikes one day,
Yeah.
right? But the courage to see ourselves as whole.
I love that so much. I just jotted down a couple things. That was a whole gold mine what you just shared there. Only feedback, never failure. I might make that the title of this podcast. But I also like what you said about looking for something to be wrong. Like when I did all these tests, I'm like, "Ooh, maybe it's my thyroid. Ooh, maybe it's my testosterone." Because you want to be like,
Yeah.
this is the reason. And when I just tweak this one little thing, everything's going to be good. And unfortunately, this decade we're in with it's just this moving target.
Hmm.
And even if there was something wrong with my thyroid, I'm like, what am I going to take thyroid medication now?
Right.
That's not something I want to do. And I'm like, again, going back to these foundations, the answer is all in this kind of natural getting back to the basics and really listening to our bodies. And, we didn't even have enough time to talk about stress and
Mm.
the nervous system regulation. So I'll have to have you on another time to talk about that because that's its own topic and something that I'm really starting to understand in myself now is like, I feel like I'm handling stress, but it's manifesting in my body in these other ways.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm like, I got this.
Well, this is just it. And you cannot have one without the other. You cannot have a healthy body without a regulated nervous system. You can't have a regulated nervous system without a healthy body. And we want as humans to come in and be like, okay, but which one? Right?
Yeah.
Which one do I focus on?
Where do I start?
Um,
Yeah.
the truth is like you need both.
Hmm.
And nervous system regulation, habits that support the internal healing, healing and processing our trauma that we're carrying, healing and shifting our identities, the stories, the narrative that we've told ourselves our entire lives, really unpacking and examining our belief systems. All of that inner work is fundamental. You can't separate it,
Hmm.
right? The conventional medical model has historically tried to separate it, and that's the whole design of the model, is separate everything into these
Right.
individual parts, right? And the more focused someone becomes on one specific part, the less able they are to see the whole. And the same is true for this work too, right? The more I'm focused on nutrition and I'm only looking at the food, the
Yeah.
further away I get from seeing the person. And
Right.
similarly, if I'm only focused on nervous system regulation and I'm just doing my breath work practices and that's all I'm doing, and I'm not seeing how what I'm eating is affecting my body, I've lost sight of the whole person.
Yeah.
So you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, I know. And I'm definitely wary of when I meet people and they have like a long way to go. And starting small, and this is the question I will ask you, and we'll leave our audience with, is if you could provide like three key things that with all the noise out there around health and wellness right now, what are three key things that women can focus on right now that aren't going to feel like a checklist, that aren't going to create pressure and stress around like, oh, I gotta do these three things or else I'm gonna I want, coming from that whole person wellness.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, I think one of the biggest things that I will die on this hill is eat real food.
Mhm.
Like, just bottom line. And I know that that can feel hard or like a to-do list, but just eat real food. And what is real food? The fact that this should even be controversial to me is so heartbreaking.
Right.
But look to nature. Like, if you can find it in its original source in nature, it's real food. Um, so eat real food,
Mhm.
get good sleep.
Sleep, yes.
Sleep is so important. And, so often we create these, to-do list items of a self-care routine, and it's the everything shower and the moisturizer and the journaling and the this and the that. And it's like, okay, well, how many hours of sleep did you get? And like
Yeah.
real sleep too.
Yeah.
So making your sleep hygiene
Mhm.
a priority, and moving your body because you love it, not
Yeah.
as a form of punishment,
Yes. I
right?
love.
Like, these three foundations can target almost all of our body's natural rhythms, our systems, our digestive system, our lymphatic system, our circadian, our like we can hit all of it with those three. And if I could add another one, it would be get out in nature.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I'll give you four. Of course. I mean, there's endless.
I mean, I can, yeah,
Yeah.
but like really just from like what are the foundations? What are the simple things? Like, just do those things.
Yeah.
Make Eat real food, prioritize your sleep, move your body in a way that you love, and get in nature.
Yeah. I love it. Jen and I met at a Soul Cycle class. I don't know how many years ago. 4 years ago.
No, it was
5
more
years.
than that. It would have been like
Yeah.
2015.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Time is flying. Time warp. But talk about a movement class that created synergy and community, and that's the type of movement you should be after. It shouldn't be checking a box. It should really be tapping into this gratitude that you can in fact move your body. Like, I've suffered a lot of injuries throughout my life. I was a Division 1 college soccer player, and there were moments in my career where I was like, I'm broken and I'm devastated.
Mhm.
So the days when I'm not broken now as an adult, and I'm like, man, I might be a little stiff, but I can get up and go for this like sunrise hike right now. Like, that's the type of movement people need to be checking into. Um, And we can go down the exercise rabbit hole that it should be strength building and zone two cardio and things like that. But it's like first and foremost, go find something you love to do, moving your body.
Yeah, yeah, it's so simple. And for me, it really is. I do a daily walk and I do it first thing in the morning. I walk 6 miles. And I love it
Yeah.
so much. It's literally like it's the easiest thing. I'm like not push. I mean, when I say I walk, I'm actually walking. I'm not
Yeah.
even like, some people are like arms, they're
Yeah.
they're hustling by me, and I'm like, no, I am strolling, and I have my podcast, and I love it. And when the season changed and fall came and my kids went back to school, it was like, oh, I only get to do. But that's it, right? It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. Just like
Yeah.
what do you love? What can you find appreciation
Yeah.
for when you're doing it?
Yeah. I think we probably cross paths, but I'm further north on the beach. So I'm walking on the beach early in the morning, and I'm going in the dark now. I know. I thought you guys got to follow Jen on Instagram. What is your handle?
So it's Dr. Jenn Chrisman, Dr. dot Jen with two N's, Chrisman.
And
Yeah.
how do you spell Chrisman too?
Chrisman.
Yes, you'll have to go and see you guys. She posts beautiful messages. There's so much education and just inspiration and motivation around food and loving yourself and just getting out in nature. And I'm doing the same thing, just a little bit
Yeah,
further north of you.
I love
But
it.
I'm always like, I find it amazing sometimes when I'm down there early in the morning that I'm like one of the only humans on planet Earth in this particular location. And I'm like looking all around. I'm like, there's so many people in this town, but I'm the only one right here.
Yeah.
Kind of
Well,
like a magical moment. Yeah.
especially in those dark hours of the morning now, it's
Yeah.
really I've been very sad and pouty that it's
Yeah.
dark in the morning.
Yeah. Because it's been foggy, we haven't had that beautiful fall glow sunrise that usually happens. There's been a handful of them, but I have missed it too. And it's definitely spooky, but because I have my big dog with me, I feel
Uh,
very, very protected, even though he's like a total docile like
y-
beast. But
yeah,
he's
my dog is 6 pounds and not a morning person, so
yeah,
he does not go walking with me.
6 miles. That would be a lot for his little legs.
Yeah, it's just me on my own.
Well, Jen, this was such a treat, and I would absolutely love to have you back on to talk. We didn't even cover half the things I wanted to. But thank you again. And is there how can people find you and how can people work with you?
Yeah, so right now I am just working one to one with clients. I do a 4 month coaching package that will involve a very extensive assessment and then sometimes lab tests when indicated. And just we'll just touch very, very quickly on the lab test because it is something that we talked about a little bit, but there is that human nature to want to understand.
Mhm.
And the testing gives us data and it gives us information. And many of the tests that I recommend are actually tests that I think everybody should be doing on a yearly basis, anyways. So, getting a comprehensive metabolic panel, which is most likely going to be a little bit different than what your primary care physician would order, because unfortunately, nature of the medical system and insurance is that they are not going to cover a lot of these tests, and doctors will get pushback if they even place the order. So we're testing for a few things that are not typically going to be tested in the regular blood panel. A hormone test
Mhm.
is one that is a good idea. Again, um, we can attach a diagnosis to whatever results we get back, but more than anything, we can use it as information and a measuring point. I also really like doing a GI map to just assess and look at like what's happening at the level of the gut, because the gut really is the control center.
Yeah.
We want to think it's the brain, but it,
Right.
it really, and they say the gut is the second brain. I think it's the first brain.
Yeah.
It's controlling everything, and our lives are entirely guided by these little trillions of bacteria. And so understanding which ones I'm working with. So those are just three tests that are super helpful. Are they necessarily required? No, of course not. But sometimes a lot of people, and then depending on, anything else that someone is presenting with, there's, other tests that we may choose to run, like toxicity looking at heavy metals, mold, toxins, things like that. And then from there, we develop personalized protocols based
Yeah.
on someone's, what they're moving through, what they're working through. And it'll be a nutritional protocol, but it's also going to be a lifestyle protocol. It's going to be, some everything that I've done for the last 20 years in the clinical world of just, healing and working. And, sometimes that will also involve working with plant medicines. And, there's many different paths and ways, but right now it's just in that capacity of one to one.
Yeah, another topic we didn't get into that I really wanted to. So we're gonna have to have you back on, but everyone go check her out because she offers, I mean, you're like the doctor that I wish I had 10, 15 years ago. You know what I mean? Like there's just so much has changed with all of this stuff. And this is really the whole person approach specifically for women that
That's it.
it's everything we need right now. And it's not gonna be a diagnosis. It's gonna be a lifestyle plan that is compassionate and
Yeah.
healing, and that's what we need right now. So thank you again, Jen, for being here, and
Thank you
until
so
next
much
time.
for having me.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you soon. Bye. Hey, you've just listened to an episode of Find Myself Free. And if some part of this left you wanting more, if your curiosity has been piqued and your intuition is telling you, I'm ready for more, then check out my coaching offers at findmyselffree.com. I have the Brave course to help you break free from booze. And I designed this course with the exact lessons that led to my transformation. I also have the Balance Challenge for those ready to learn the art of cycle syncing to balance their hormones. If you're looking for additional support and to take either of these programs to the next level, I also offer one-on-one coaching. Now, I worked with a coach for 4 months at the start of my alcohol free journey, and it made all the difference. Being able to talk to someone who knew what I was going through and could help me navigate my new world gave me a foundation of support I could build on. And it's a big reason why I'm a coach today. I want to help others find their freedom and level up their health. If this sounds good to you, connect with me at findmyselffree.com and set up a call. Listen to your intuition that is telling you you were meant for more. I am with you. You got this.